A lot of people use jump height as their main metric when they're analyzing a counter movement jump on force plays. And it makes sense. It's easy, it's clean, it's simple to understand. But there's a piece of it that gets missed if you're only looking at jump height. So today we're breaking down the key metrics that you need to look at beyond just jump height in your counter movement jumps on force plays. Because we know that two athletes can get the same jump height, but get there in totally different ways. Because jump height is just the outcome. It tells you what happened, but it doesn't tell us how it happened. And in sports science, the how is the most important thing when it comes to making decisions. This here is a counter movement jump force time curve spit out by a force plate. And force plates might give you how high somebody jumps, but they also give you all of this background information, which if you're not using, kind of just goes to waste. So we can trace through the curve in this way. This is the baseline unweighting phase. The person unweights and starts the jump. Then they start slamming on the brakes. Until this point, this is the lowest part of their counter movement jump in the bottom before they come back up. Then they have the propulsive phase, the flight phase, and the braking phase. If you want to do a deeper dive into this, I have a video that I'll link above that you can go check out as well. Having a better understanding of this force time curve allows you to go deeper into your jump and have a better understanding of how somebody is doing that jump. And this is how you move beyond just jump height into something a little bit more useful. And if jump height is just the outcome, then what should we actually be looking at? And really it can be broken down into two things. We have our strategy metrics and we have our outcome metrics. So these are how somebody did something and these are what they did. And we'll break them down and go into what I look for in each side. The first one is our time to take off. And that is the time from the initiation of the jump here to takeoff, which is right here. And what we need to know is that there isn't a better or a worse necessarily in this. Somebody might have a long time to take off, but that might be because they go down really low in the eccentric phase of their jump, because they unweight heavily, or they might have a shorter time to take off because they're a volleyball player and they're used to just being able to jump very, very quickly and get off the ground to block a spike. So generally, more time to take off means more of a counter movement, more depth to it, and more time to build the force on the concentric phase as well. Less time to take off might be a little bit more of a stiffer strategy or a more elastic strategy rather than a force-based strategy. Next, we have our counter movement depth, which doesn't necessarily show up right on the force time curve, but is derived from that. It's how low our center of mass goes before we come back up. So basically, from this phase to this point, what the depth of our center of mass is here. And again, two athletes could end up with the same jump height, but have completely different counter movement depths based off of sport, their lower body strength versus elasticity, their stretch shortening cycle ability. What you might see when you're tracking counter movement depth over time is that their jump height increases, but their counter movement depth decreases. And that might be preferable for a volleyball player or a basketball player. Meanwhile, what you also might see over the course of a heavy training block is their jump height stay consistent, but their depth increase because they need to go down lower to be able to generate that propulsive force to come off the ground. So you can use that counter movement depth as a strategy metric to understand how somebody might be fatiguing, for instance. Next, we have our net eccentric impulse, which is in this phase right here, our eccentric phase, the area under the curve. An impulse is just force multiplied by the time. So that might indicate that in the same time period, somebody just has a higher force and they're actually more in this range, which means they're producing more force across the whole phase. Or maybe that eccentric phase is elongated and the peak force is actually still the same. So their eccentric impulse increases, but it's just because it's over a longer period of time. So eccentric impulse is something that you have to look back into time to take off and kind of put those two together and understand that eccentric impulse is impacted by time to take off. So if one is increasing, what's happening with the other, and is that leading to the change here? And because eccentric impulse is a good measure of braking capacity and oftentimes eccentric quad strength, it's really important in the rehab space to have a good understanding of the eccentric impulse abilities of your athlete that's maybe rehabbing and the team itself, so you can compare and contrast. Next metric that we're going to talk about is our jump height, which is an outcome-based measure. And our jump height is going to be derived from the impulse of the concentric phase of the jump, which is the area under the curve in this concentric phase. So obviously jump height is easy to track, easy for athletes to understand, and is a good metric to use to understand if somebody's fatiguing, getting better. But now we have some more context to look back at what's happened before and what might be impacting our jump height. Next on our list is our modified RSI. So that is our reactive strength index. And that's just a ratio of how long somebody is in the air versus how long it took them to take off. So as you can guess, this is a strategy metric because it's impacted by how you're doing the jump rather than just what is coming out of the jump. So somebody might have the same flight time calculated based off of their takeoff velocity, but they might be contracting this into a shorter time period. So in that case, their RSI is going up, their time to take off is decreasing. That's probably a good result for most athletes. On the flip side, what you might see with somebody that's getting fatigued is this period here, their time to take off is elongating, but they're still getting the same jump height. So they're changing their strategy to get the same performance metric or outcome metric, but they're doing it in a way that is probably not the best strategy for most athletes. Most athletes don't want to jump slower. Looking at the power production of an athlete is also super important. Obviously, a lot of athletes need to be super powerful, and power is work over time. And really, this is giving us an overview of the ability to produce maximum force in a minimal amount of time, combining both strength and velocity on the concentric phase of the jump. So here we walk through 6 strategy and outcome metrics that can give us more of an insight into what's happening in a jump than just looking at strictly jump height. We can go back and we look at, how long it takes them to get there, how far they're going down in their jump, how hard and fast they're slamming on the brakes with their eccentric impulse, and the ratio of their jump height to how long it takes them to get to takeoff. In addition, we obviously have our jump height and the power outputs. All of these things in combination can then give you better insights into how somebody is jumping rather than only looking at just that jump height. And then the next layer to this is, now that we understand that there are these metrics, you start to see patterns or pick up on how something like time to take off be associated with a change in counter movement depth. And a change in counter movement depth might be impacting the RSI and the jump height and the power, and how they all interplay together to give us a holistic overview of how somebody is actually performing the jump. So now you can go to your coaches or to your athlete, and instead of just giving them how high they jumped, you can say how high they jumped, how long did it take, how deep they went, did they control the descent, were they aggressive, and how efficiently did they reverse it. And from that, you can also look and see that 2 people might have the same jump height, but how they get there is completely different. And therefore, what they're doing in their in-gym programming needs to be different to work on both their strengths and their weaknesses. And this really is the crux of being a sports scientist and a strength and conditioning coach in 2026. It's the difference between just collecting data and actually using it in your day-to-day. Because things like fatigue, pain, confidence, they don't always show up in these outcome metrics, but they can show up in movement changes and changes in strategy. And really that deeper layer is what's going to separate you from somebody that's just using their force plates to collect data. And if you enjoyed a breakdown like this, you'll enjoy this channel. This is what I do. I try to break down sports science and strength and conditioning topics into bite-sized pieces that can help you become a better practitioner in your day-to-day. So I invite you to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.